Hello, my beautiful friends, my fellow space blobs and earth blobs and fairy blobs and sparkly blobs and moon blobs and sun blobs. And if you don't happen to relate to being a blob, well, all the forms are welcome here. We are an array of forms and shapes and styles, and they're changing all the time. So, welcome, welcome, welcome. And let's get into a conversation, I think, that is going to be so supportive for the Sagittarius full moon, get us really illuminated and honest, and having a lot of clarity of insight about what is coming up next. This is one of my favorite full moons every single year, and I do have an affinity with Sagittarius and the energy that Sagittarius is all about. It's my rising sign. It is my favorite energy probably to spend any time with. So I will put that disclaimer out there right now that I'm already very partial to this energy and to what it tends to bring into the conversation. But when we're thinking about Sagittarius and a full moon like this, it's expansive. It wants to look at the big picture. It wants to help us see things in a really true way that helps us express our truest selves. And it often will just get to the heart of the matter. I almost always find that the Sagittarius full moon every year we'll just get straight to the core of what it is that I'm actually asking about and wanting to know and what I'm needing to work with next. So I find this to be one of the most illuminating, amazing full moons every single year, and I hope you'll feel the same way. So get your tea, get your journal, get whatever you like to do while I'm sitting around in the background talking, and let's get cozy and create a little bit of a playful energy to prepare us for this full moon in Sagittarius. We have to start off this full moon by talking about the Gemini-Sag axis because this conversation is so rich and dense, and the interplay between these two signs I've always found to be really fascinating and very recharging for my spirit, for my soul, for my imagination. Of course, the Gemini-Sagittarius axis is going to get lit up by this full moon with the sun at 2 degrees of Gemini, the moon at 2 degrees of Sagittarius. And these two really work together. These are a very philosophical pair. These are the asking questions pair. They are very interested in how do we think? What are our philosophies? What do we want to learn? How do we want to communicate it? What does it mean? What is the item? And that interplay between these two signs means this is just about experimentation, the experimental quality of what it means to live a life, that it's innate to what we're doing. And because these are two mutable signs, air and fire, they're very curious about what happens next. Not when we just leave things in a static form, but we explore what that might look like as we continue to experiment. You know, Gemini is that third house energetics that involve the conversations we're having. What are we doing to experiment and learn and play in our day-to-day and the things immediately around us? How are we allowed to explore ourselves, hold many different opinions all at the same time, explore and deconstruct some of the ways that we might judge ourselves or the world, and kind of play with those ideas? And then Sagittarius in that ninth house energetic is all about philosophy, the big picture, the zoomed out concepts that hold us. What is our cosmology? How do we think about and write about and speak about the structure of the world and the kind of God or divine energies we believe in? What are philosophies about the meaning of life? What does something mean? And it also is just the larger container of our bigger visions, what we want to do over a long period of time. How do we want things to move on that big perspective? So these two signs just want to keep exploring and asking questions. And I think that's such an interesting place to come at a full moon from. Because if we're just in this space of getting curious about the experimentation of living a life, of getting curious about how we're changing, getting curious about what that looks like without feeling like we have to jump to conclusions, judge it, assume things about ourselves, stress about what that's illuminating and revealing, some really interesting things can come to light. I also think this full moon is very useful after the energetics of the last 6 months, as we've been moving through some denser conversations, some denser question asking, coming out of things like the eclipse season we moved through, adjusting to Pluto and Aquarius. This is a really great full moon for getting acquainted with how we're surprising ourselves as we move forward. So one of the big conversation that's going to be happening during this full moon is also about an energetic changeover that is occurring, because this full moon is happening just a few days before Jupiter switches out of the sign of Taurus and moves into Gemini. And once again, lights up this Gemini-Sagittarius axis in a really beautiful way. And so this full moon is also preparing us and illuminating the path for what is coming up energetically for us over the next year as Jupiter moves through Gemini. It's this kind of doorway energy between the last year of exploration with Jupiter and Taurus and this coming year of exploration with Jupiter in Gemini. And this full moon is actually going to be opposing Jupiter and Venus conjunct at the very last degree of Taurus. So right before it moves through. And I just love that this is what's going on with this Sagittarius full moon, because it really asks this question. And I think this is really the heart of this full moon. What has this last year been bringing for you? What have you noticed has been building behind the scenes? What has been slowly building into revealing itself? What wisdom have you gained? How has your body been communicating with you and letting you know where your limits are, your needs are, your desires are, your questions are? What has these last 12 months shown you vividly about who you are becoming? And on the other hand, this full moon is going to be a moment of making a little bit of space for what wants to come in next, because it's going to have such a different feel to what we've just been working on over the last year. Jupiter and Gemini, I'm going to get into it in a separate conversation, but Jupiter and Gemini is very open and can bring about a lot of surprising new developments in the way that we express ourselves, in the way that we're living our lives. It can bring in like fresh air. It's really like opening a window and letting a gust of air move in, and it brings in butterflies and new plants and seeds, and we did not see any of it coming, and bringing in new ingredients. So this is also a really beautiful full moon to just affirm your safety. Use all of that wisdom you've gained from Jupiter and Taurus that was about building foundation, getting to know yourself, getting to know your root systems, building all of that sense of safety inside of yourself to feel the openness for what's next. This is a great time to just kind of play around with what affirmations you want to use when it comes to building a sense of safety in your experimentation about what things look like next, about what life looks like next, about what the culture could look like next, about how we can change the world through our collective knowing and communicating, but also how we can experiment with our own individual lives. This is a really great full moon to release and honor the last 12 months, but also to really, really set groundwork and intentions for what you want your Jupiter and Gemini year to look and feel like, and to feel the kind of excited, tingling energy that can bring about. And then on top of that, this full moon is going to be sextiling Pluto and Aquarius exactly. At 2 degrees of Aquarius, Pluto will be sitting there. And so this is really interesting too, because Aquarius and Sagittarius get along very, very well. It's a very natural conversation. Aquarius and Sagittarius both agree that life is most interesting when you try things in a little bit of a different way and just see what happens. They're both very excited to do that. So it's really fun to have the moon and Pluto here in these two signs having this perfect sextile, because this is a supportive conversation about change. A lot of times when we talk about Pluto, there's kind of this intensity, and I'm a big advocate to take some of that intensity out and kind of calm down the situation, because I think it doesn't help me personally to think about things in these kind of destructive terms. For me, Pluto is about empowerment. It's about our relationship to change itself. And sometimes that can be a really exciting, beautiful thing. I think the moon and Pluto here sextiling like this are really thinking about like what value could come into our lives, what truth could come into our lives that would involve change, that would involve perhaps release and grief and a little phase of confusion, but would also break open a life that fits more beautifully. You know, sometimes I think the questions that come up around this theme of change and how we're changing and how to be honest with ourselves is that, you know, sometimes holding the same shape has its secret advantages, right? It means we don't have to be vulnerable, or it means we don't have to tell somebody the truth, or it means that we don't have to face some of our core beliefs about what we're allowed or disallowed in this life. It can often keep us in a zone of safety, which is understandable. I think that sometimes we need that, and we each have to decide when we're ready for change to come. But I think that this full moon is asking, where are we holding ourselves back? And we're holding ourselves back, and it's not actually bringing us to our truest life. You know, what old identities are we still holding on to and feeling like it's too scary to let go? What are we scared we will look like a fool if we begin? What's a secret safety that we might be holding on to around these familiar identities that we're grappling with? And all we need to do here is just like ask those questions. You know, where are we resisting our own becoming, our own self-knowing? And how do we allow there to be a little bit of space to let ourselves start that changing and expressing process? How do we create fertile soil and safe spaces for ourselves to start expressing more truly, to start incorporating more of our true selves in the day-to-day? And how can we also just create a moment of grace for the identities that are releasing at this time? I think that this is a full moon that's so full of like new inventive energy. I think a lot of us are going to be feeling this excitement about the new expressions that are bubbling up, the butterflies in the tummy, the curiosity that's coming in. And that is so exciting. And I think that's a really core element of this full moon. But I think also it's a really beautiful time to just take a moment to honor what's leaving and feel the complex emotions about what is leaving as well. And I think that sextile is a supportive, helping energy saying, what can we really proactively release at this time and say we don't need to keep doing, we don't need to keep performing, we don't need to keep ourselves on the wheel going around and around with anymore? What can we actually put down at this time so that we prepare space for what is coming next as we move through this next year with Jupiter in Gemini? So it's just an exciting full moon. There's a lot of energy there. I think a lot of us are going to be having all sorts of ideas and visions, and just like, this is a great time to just get out like the storyboards and the art projects and just like let yourself journal about all sorts of ideas that are coming in, and just like going with the flow of what's wanting to come through and witnessing it. But also a time to just, yeah, like make a little bit of space for that by thinking about what we're ready to let go of. So yeah, it's a big moon. I always find this moon will just tell me directly what I need to accept and what I need to pay attention to. And I could like never escape the clear messages that come through during this full moon. It's like every year, it's the same thing. And so I'm just ready to be given some truths. It's personally one of my moons that's just very on the nose for me. And we're pulling our cards, and 2 cards already came out. Which is the 7 of Wands and the 6 of Swords. There you go. This is interesting that these 2 cards came out, because these really speak to what I was just talking about with that Pluto sextile. Because I was just saying how we have to make space, and full moons often are about release. We have to make space for all these new visions. If we keep using all of our energy up every morning, doing the same routine, helping out that friend, whatever it is, going around the same drudgery, like we'll never have space for the thing that we really want to do, right? It's like, And that sometimes it's a really difficult thing to figure out how to practically do it. But sometimes we have to invert everything. Like if we really have an art project we want to do, even if we only get 5 minutes, it's the first thing we do in the day rather than waiting till the end of the day when we know we're not going to do it. It's those kinds of things. But regardless, these cards are about what we need to let go of in order to make space for whatever's trying to come in, because it's like, I just feel this energy building up and it's like the door wants to burst open. So we need to make some space for things. And we're doing that here in these 2 cards. So that's clearly the message that's wanting to come through at this time. So the 7 of Swords the 7 of Wands is really interesting because it's a card of a little bit of friction, right? This is somebody who has succeeded at something, has gotten through to something, has succeeded in getting to the top of this hill, but now is using a lot of energy to keep that going, to keep that system moving through. And that can be really tiring after a time. And while on the one hand, this can be about, if the thing you want, you need to keep striving for it. You can't let the world tell you not to have it. And that's one way to interpret it. But it's also true that we don't want to use all of our energy battling against forces and focusing on that battle when we have something more important. So for me, this particular reading, I'm getting the sense that for the 7 of Wands conversation, where are we using a lot of energy trying to convince people of ourselves, trying to convince ourselves, trying to fight battles that people don't really want to listen to? Where can we let go and make some space there where we don't have to try and convince somebody of our project? We don't have to try and convince somebody of our worthiness. We don't have to try to do all of that labor. And where can we just reclaim some of our space for focusing on what it is that's wanting to come to life? And then 6 of Swords is really simple, really to the point. The 6 of Swords for me is leaving the known shore. And that can be a little bittersweet because we might be leaving behind the familiarity, the comfort, the known thing. But we also know that it's starting to chafe. It's starting to even hurt us a little bit to stay in that same form. And we're going to a shore we don't know yet. And we're in that river of life and we're allowing there to be a little bit of space here to just see what wants to meet us next. Even in giving ourselves permission to step away from a certain form of self-expression, a certain way of dressing, a certain way of speaking, or whatever it is that we're expecting of ourselves in this life that doesn't feel right anymore. It doesn't feel like it fits us anymore. This can be really small things, by the way. It could be the shoes you're choosing to wear. It can be so small. It doesn't always have to be seismic life changes. We're also creating space as we let those shifts happen. We're just creating space for new elements to meet us. And I think at its core, that's what this full moon's about. It's not about jumping to conclusions. It's not about getting all the right answers. It's about entertaining the idea of there being a little bit of space and then seeing what comes in as we do that. So this is a really inspiring, creative, artistic full moon. I'm going to be doing a visualization and a journaling practice with my patrons over on Patreon for this full moon, and it's going to be really juicy. We're going to be processing the last year and opening up space for the coming year and giving ourselves that moment of just really feeling through it and letting it move through. It's going to be super powerful. I'm really excited about that. You can also join me for the tarot journey. We are coming to the end of it, so you can catch up on all of the episodes. It's a 12 series journey where we go through all 22 cards of the major arcana, and I just really delve deep and help us to activate those energies and work with them in meaningful, soothing, comforting, but very deeply empowering ways. So I'd love to see you for that. I love it when you stick around here. The subscribes button is right there, and it really helps me, as well as let me know if you made it this far. Tell me about your relationship to Sagittarius. Does it bring you to life as much as it does me? Do you get excited about the Sagittarius full moon every year? What are you feeling coming up right now in your life as you're moving through this? I'd really love to hear. So leave me a comment and I will see you back here. We are going to be talking about this Jupiter and Gemini year ahead very, very shortly. So come back here. Be sure to come back around because I am going to deep dive on that topic and just really open it up for us. So I hope to see you here for that. I'll see you also very soon. Have a beautiful full moon in Sagittarius.